the records. You look at verse 9. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob. His allotted heritage. So he appointed for himself to watch over Israel. And then he got a special angel, Michael, over it. Interesting. So God set up a structure, a divine structure, a heavenly structure over the earth. And yesterday I told you that Satan also has his shadow government of the principalities of evil and what they do. And in 2020, I began to explain to you what the Lord was helping us to understand about our world and what was going on with the COVID plans and so on. And he said, what you're dealing with is the prince of Assyria. Now, the Assyrian Empire was a global empire, was a world empire. And so Satan set up his shadow government over that global empire, headed by the prince of Assyria. And so when you study the scriptures, you would observe when God talks to the human leaders of Assyria, and when he talks to the prince, or talks about the prince of Assyria, he talks to him prophetically or talks about him prophetically. And I want to show you certain things that he said there. It'll give you a clarity as to these plans that you have coming from the World Economic Forum and its global future cancers. Isaiah chapter 10. Let me read one verse to begin with. Verse 1. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees. Woe unto those who make unjust laws. Unjust laws. So God knows that men do make unjust laws. There are unjust laws. And they're used for certain purposes. Robbing the poor. Look at verse 2. To turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people. See that? Unrighteous decrees, unrighteous laws, for the purpose of injustice and robbery. So this is the weaponization of the justice system. You can see it right there. So God He's not in support of such things. And when he's not in support of something, he tells us what to do, what to say. We're not victims, we're victors in Christ Jesus. That's who we are. So I want to read further. Look at verse 12 from the NIV. So you see, he's dealing with the prince of Assyria here, sometimes addressed as king of Assyria, just like you have in the book of Daniel. When you read in chapter 10, he talks about the prince of Persia, and then he uses another term, the kings of Persia. All right? Okay, go to verse 13. Here is his address. For he says, he speaks of this evil principality and reveals his plan to us. He reveals the plan to us by quoting what this prince of evil said in his heart. For he says, by the strength of my hand, I have done this, and by my wisdom, because I have understanding, I removed the boundaries of nations. Look at that. I removed the boundaries of nations. Why do you think many nations are going through this today? With the doctrine of replacement, in which they bring in other peoples to repopulate cities, repopulate nations. You're seeing that in Europe, in the United States. They actually want to do it all over the world. But that's just one of the plans. Not because that's the ultimate plan. The crazy stuff. I'll get into that. But let's read. It says, I removed the boundaries of nations. I plundered their treasuries. Look what happened from COVID. How many nations gave up so much? They pledged with their sovereign assets to pay for vaccines that never worked. Vaccines that were not vaccines. And look at all that's coming up as a result of these vaccines, all the vaccine injury issues all around the world, which the media collaborators are hiding. They don't want you to know. It says, I removed the boundaries of nations. I plundered their treasuries. Like a mighty one, I subdued their kings. Think about what happened. Where were the presidents and prime ministers of nations? All of them just went. They were all afraid. They were all putting on masks. Subdued. Subdued. Who subdued them? I just showed you. The prince of Assyria. An evil principality of darkness was responsible in the realm of the spirit. Now, don't forget what I told you. We'll come back here. Remember, we read in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. The rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. The rulers of the darkness of this world. It says, when you look at the troubles in the world, the problems in the world, don't look at flesh and blood. It's more than flesh and blood. It says, this is happening in the spirit realm. Principalities, powers, rulers of darkness. Go back to where we were in Isaiah chapter 10. No, we're in verse 12. Okay. It's 13, thank you. I plundered their treasures like a mighty one. I subdued their kings. That all that you saw that happen in 2020, the 2021, 2022, you saw that. They had no clue on what they were doing. Because they were being controlled from the realm of the spirit. And that was why we had to do our part in the realm of the spirit and dislodge them and paralyze their efforts. That's why they didn't know what to do anymore. I told you at that time, I said, the vaccine mandate will go to nothing. And it did. I told you the COVID, it was a fiasco. And that's what happened. We knew exactly what to do in the spirit. Otherwise, they had instituted a world of fear and darkness, which is what they still like, but they're coming with sweet presentations. I'll give you some ideas shortly. Look at verse 14. As one reaches into a nest, so my hand reached for the wealth of the nations. See how many nations are in poverty, in want and penury today. They lost so much. They lost so much. They paid so much for nothing. Got nothing back. Paid so much. Got nothing. Now they're in poverty. You saw what happened to Sri Lanka in that video we just showed you. How they advertised on their website, Sri Lanka was